Welcome all to Learning You, an SNHU Support Podcast. I'm your host, academic coach Kayleigh Guzel, and this is a show for learners. Now more than ever, people are learning online, and Southern New Hampshire University is leading the way. We empower all learners, working adults, military families, refugees, and everyone in between, because we believe knowledge is power, and access to education can change the world. Academic Support is a dedicated team employed by Southern New Hampshire University, and we help students succeed. We've got our finger on the pulse of this institution because we talk to learners like you every day. More than basic proofreading or math help, our peer tutors and academic coaches listen to students' unique needs and help them build transferable life skills. Alongside academic skills, we coach, tutor, and build resources that help students teach themselves. And now we have this show dedicated to what our learners are going through. Anxious about math? Terrified of writing? Struggling with the time management or the work-life school balance? We're here to help you through. Today's topic is community, but we'll be starting on the dark side of the moon with loneliness. In preparing to discuss this topic, I got to Googling to see what people online were asking about loneliness. Does it change one's personality? How does it affect relationships, happiness, overall well-being? As for disconnection in school, people wanted to know if loneliness affects academic success. It's been studied quite a lot from what I found, and the clear answer is yes, loneliness leads to less success in academics. So, how can a student find their support system, especially in the online learning landscape? I have academic coaches Dee Parker and Dave Gonthier here with me today to help unpack some of this. Warm welcome to you, Dee, and welcome back, David. Thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here again.
Thank you for having me, Kay.
It's good to see you both in this disconnected world, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that. David was on with us for episode 1 about mindfulness, and I'm sure he will share more of his tenets on that again. So I'm just going to get right into some questions and talk a little bit eventually about workshops, which is something that Academic Support offers that both of you are very versed in as workshop hosts. So, how do you see the loneliness of online learning in yourselves, your kids, your students? What are we looking at? Just kind of want to build a foundation from your own beautiful experience.
This is it's an interesting question in terms of the support, because a lot of students that I do deal with actually are really you could actually hear it in their voice, you could hear it in their get it in their spirit when they're actually able to reach out during a workshop, and then they realize, like, when we start naming all of our resources too, like from everything from math coaching to live chat, the students really are really kind of warm, kind of get a warm feeling, I think, with that too, and they really are very vocal about expressing that, I think. So so it's an interesting topic because I come across it very regularly in my online coaching, individually and in workshops.
Yeah, I think we see this loneliness in the disconnected world really kind of facing either in a positive or a negative light. From what I see, there's the aspect of not being able to connect, face to face with everybody, being able to share what you're going through. But there's also this really positive aspect of being able to leave some of that stuff behind that was maybe holding some people back. I have a freshman high schooler is my son, and his positive experience in this disconnected world has been able to leave behind some of that peer pressure and judgment that comes in certain settings, I think. And he's been able to focus a little bit more on better strategies for himself and kind of come out of that with a really good outlook on education. So I see it from both sides, where you can see the loneliness kind of forming into something that we can see as a positive, as well as maybe something that isn't. But we get to focus a little bit more on the positive in our coaching roles, which is really fun.
I was just going to say I love that because I think the looking at the positive aspect of it, because loneliness is it's a lonely word, isn't it? But I'm thinking that, like, what's really exciting about this, and especially excited about being an online coach, even versus a professor, because I'm also a professor, and I teach courses and do all the grading stuff, but there's just something really refreshing And I tell my students this too about being a coach, where we're really in here together. You're not coming to me under this kind of stress of I'm grading you. We really do build a community with that too. We find that and Dee, I know you and I have talked about this quite a lot too, is that we really feel like we're collaborating with the students, because and both of us, I think that's part of our style, in terms of it's like, yeah, we'll have certain knowledge, but at the same time, whenever I feel like I'm talking about this, it's this kind of sort of community. And I think that's what the students are really wanting. And another quick thing too, before I don't want to take up too much time here too. But feeding off of what you were saying, Dee, I'm really excited where we are in education, because we're on a ground floor. And I think part of any ground floor transition into anything new is going to bring out these kind of fear, loneliness. I'm even thinking, 100 plus years ago, when the public school system came about, and that was brand new. The trends, like during the Industrial Revolution way back when. We're here now in this information age, and we're kind of, education is moving. So I kind of see it as kind of like we're in this sort of transitional stage, which can be very exciting, change.
Sure, I think it allows us to kind of write the rules, I think, and I've been on the academic support team maybe a few months longer than David, but we were here pretty early on, about 5 years ago, and the iterations of academic support and what it used to be and how dynamic it is now. Like, we never even used to talk to students live, and now it's pretty much all we do. So it's interesting to watch the model shift with what we analyze and study and intuit what students need. I had a question about the role of the expert, or the professor versus coach role, that was going to come a little later down the line. But since we touched upon it already, David, let me put this on your plate and have you stick a fork in it. Okay. A solution to isolation in the online classroom that I read about in an article that will be in the show notes for listeners if they want to check that out is the concept of letting the expert leave the room. That students in an online situation, when they can get out from under their instructor or professor's gaze, they connect more with each other. I think that's why so many Facebook groups for SNHU are out there in the stratosphere, and we're looking at those too, and we've tried to build online communities where just students are with each other, and that's it. But what do you think about that idea of the expert or the authority, and what's the benefit of the coach role for the student, where maybe because I know when I was coaching more one-on-one, I would have students be like, "Oh, you're so good at this," or you're the best writer I've ever seen. And I'm like, well, it's a muscle and I do it every day. um, so that touches upon our last episode about growth mindset a little bit, that it's something that gets built over time. But what do you think about your role as an authority or not, or what the coach role is to you, maybe?
But yeah, I feel that that's a great question, and it speaks to what part of our mission statement is too, as coaches too, about this idea of non-directive coaching. This idea that first and foremost, that what we're trying to do is to nurture creativity and independence, and getting people to feel confident in what they're doing. And I feel that when we do, remove that from the team, which on a level is kind of too bad, because I don't want to say anything, negative about the instructors too, because it's obviously they have a very specific role. But as we know, it's not the instructors themselves; it's the system that we're all part of. That's that sort of fear, that grading, that stigma that kind of goes along with that too. So I feel it's wonderful to be able to come at it from both ends. I mean, I do enjoy classroom teaching, but I tell people as a coach, and I'm not afraid to say this, it's the best gig in town as a teacher. You feel like you're stripping away all of that noise of oh, what do I'm this person that's grading you and all that stuff, and we can have great conversations. And even with working with Dee, when we used to do our series together, we would just be bringing in our ideas on our own learning, our own, even humbling ourselves too, being able to kind of say, well, you know what, I struggled with this, and but then this is what I did to overcome it. So it's really, I think it's a wonderful platform to be able to kind of talk about ourselves without that sort of distance of I'm the teacher, I'm the boss. And I always tell my students, don't call me the boss. I'm not your boss. Please don't do that. I don't like that. I'm not good at it. I'm not good at that. And I've never been good at that authority thing anyway. So I just kind of like, let's be able to talk about what we're talking about. And yeah, but yeah, I think I think students seem to appreciate that because they voice that in terms of, reaching out.
Yeah, no, I think it's that initial when students come into a one-on-one session with us, they see us initially as kind of that authority type, maybe even like that professor type. But once they start to work with us, that usually kind of tends to fade into the background. There is that initial, oh, you're this like, quote unquote expert, and they're very concerned about that. But for me, coaching has this really wonderful ability to kind of transcend, like you were saying, Dave, that actual teaching and become this, like you said, very collaborative. And it's this very supportive learning environment where we do get to learn. We learn from one another. And I actually have had some really wonderful sessions with students lately where I am learning some wonderful content that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to learn otherwise. So as a teacher or even as a tutor in the past in different positions or gigs that I've had, I was able to teach, content and strategies to go along with that specific content in English and reading and writing that I was working with. But what I get to do as a coach is have that opportunity to do a little bit of that, but I get to focus a little bit more on reflecting with students about, maybe what their strengths and weaknesses are, as well as my own strengths and weaknesses. And we use that to kind of create this really great personalized approach to meeting the goals that they have. So that's what's really great about it, I think.
So I want to refer to the article again, and I do think that we're kind of naturally pulling pieces of these questions into the conversation, which is why there's just a few, and I'll jump on and off the page, yeah. But I have a quote here from the article that's in the show notes, if you want to read it some more, listeners, from a Canadian administrator from Trinity Western University talking about the topic of e-learning and remote learning and the challenges that come with it. And his advice is to start with empathy in these strange and wonderful times. Start with presuming that the person you're talking to has had a really bad day. Do you think as a coach you're able to do this whole empathy thing, and how do you practice it?
It's almost like you could actually even say that the core of all of this is empathy, that it's not so much that we're bringing it in, but I really think it's all revolving around it. It's like kind of in a very holistic way. It's got to start with that. And I'm just thinking, yeah, the big part of coaching from my part is to really, it's to think of a mindful concept is to be in the moment. Literally, you kind of have to just, kind of go with it and kind of see where people are at. So there's a lot of, in a way, kind of strange mind reading that goes on with the session. You kind of feel the energy, and I think that I don't necessarily look at it that way in terms of assuming people have a heart. I think I might look at it opposite. I think I might assume that people are actually, their well-being is up, because if I look at it that way, it's almost like assuming that I'm taking on the role of a teacher again or a boss, but I'm almost like I would like to think already that I'm talking with someone with a goal to empower them. So in a way, what a lot of my one-on-one students, I look at the students that I meet regularly. It's almost like I feel like I'm already in a position to try to empower them. That we're already like on a collaborative level. So I don't know if that's answering it at all, or if it's just dancing around it, but I'm going to dance around it a little thing. Yeah, but it is feeling. Empathy is huge. Emotional intelligence, I think, would be kind of that key term that would go along with that too.
Yes, for those of us listeners who were here for episode 1, we talked about this before. I guess I don't know if you danced around it or not, because I could just watch you dance all day. Yeah. But I think what I'm asking, I think, is what kind of methods do you use to show the student that you're on their team and you understand that they're a whole human being with a whole life coming in to talk about school?
I think it's sort of a method, and I think I agree with Dave. It's not about assuming anybody's had a bad day. I think the empathy really comes into play. I think I consider students and their emotions and the day that they've had and the assignment that they're working on as sort of like Schrodinger's cat. So Erwin Schrödinger, he created this, what was it, like a thought experiment to illustrate superposition, right, in quantum mechanics. So in the experiment, we put this cat in a box, and there's this event that may or may not happen. We don't know yet if it will happen. And if the event does happen, the cat will unfortunately die. And so if we don't know the experiment has actually happened, that event has actually taken place, the cat is either alive or dead until you look in the box. So it's both. So for me, when I think about a student that's entering a session, I kind of assume that whatever's happening for them, it could be either or. And as a coach, it's about being able to say, okay, well, let's do this together. Let's look at this together. Let's talk out what needs to be talked out and approach it again in that collaborative manner. So I think the strategy, if you want a strategy, is that collaboration to let them know we're here and we want to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like.
And I don't know if I danced that. I don't know if I answered it or danced around it either.
Yeah.
But
We're dancing
Danced
tonight. Well, I think that there's an important undercurrent to that, and that is you don't know what you're going to get into
Yep.
As a coach, but as a student, you know you're going to come into a conversation with a professional. I might be the least professional on the team, but that's why I'm the host. No, I think that that's something that is just a funny little one-way street about coaching, is that you can come in however you want, and we're going to meet you there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. And what I find along those lines too, and it's demystifying the process too with the student, breaking down the wall. In other words, I'm constantly trying to tell. I don't know how to word this in such a way of like, there's a method to my madness. Sort of like when I'm teaching and coaching, I'm telling the students, so here is what I am doing. So I even find that quite frequently, even at workshops, one-on-ones, I'm even saying things that go on in our podcasts, in our meeting, in our coaching meetings. What do we as coaches talk about? Because I find a lot of times there's still that wall. Whenever there's the coach and the teacher, and then there's the student. But what happens if we bring the student into the world of why we all love what we do and why we care? Like the real picture, right? Because it demystifies this whole idea of like I'm the boss of the writing program, If like I'm a great writer and a great teacher, so therefore, and it's just like it's not that. I always have had a hard time with that, anyways. Especially getting compliments. I don't know about you guys, but just like, oh yeah, you do. It's like, well, it's part. I'm doing a job, but it's not about me in a way. It's about us. It's about us having a conversation, and about me, like maybe humbling myself a lot. Because I find a lot of times I'll even go back to when I was a kid, and I'll say, you know what, your writing coach, your English professor, whatever this is, I had reading comprehension issues when I was back in 9th grade. I failed a test that put me in a special reading lab. But here's what I did to overcome it, because I was just like, I wasn't going to take that for, with my love of writing, I wasn't going to let a test, create anxiety and kind of say, suddenly I'm not going to do this anymore. So here's what I did to overcome that. And I really find that that helps. And I think my greatest mentors and teachers did the same thing. When they humbled themselves, and you suddenly said, oh, okay, you were a learner at one point too. This stuff was new to you at one point, and you discovered things along the way, and then here's what I'm doing. So I'm not keeping that a secret. I'm kind of saying, this is what we're all doing. So, we can all become students and coaches together, to bring that together. So yeah, demystifying. I like that word. I've liked that word lately. Is like take away this idea of what we think coaching is, and and it's collaboration. We care about what we do, and we care about our own learning too. I'll bring that in here too. This is always a lesson for where I am in my own life. So it's for me too. So a little selfish. I don't know.
Do I teach them?
Yeah.
Do I teach them, or do they teach me?
Right.
Well, we talked about growth mindset in the last episode with Greg and Jenny, and that the concepts that came up about, again, that reflection that Dee mentioned, that you're always kind of looking at how you learn or how you do your job or how you be a spouse or whatever it is, and you go inward, reflect on it. So like that being said, I do think that there is some some of the positives that I personally see to online learning in this new like remote life is that you do have more time to reflect and to kind of shut the door and journal if that's your cup of tea, about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and checking your values and your methods for sure. And if you can't do that alone, we're here. So now I want to talk about workshops as far as like a specific way to seek support and collaboration for our learners or learners who might be thinking about coming to SNHU, wink wink. So you two are both longtime workshop hosts for academic support. Can you explain what workshops, maybe a few of the workshop topics that you lead, how they work, and why you think that this modality of coaching or learning is beneficial um, to the learners? It's a 9-part question. Go. Yes. Okay. So what do you workshop? How do they work? And why is it a good modality?
So the workshops are a really great opportunity to get together with your peers, is what I love about them. We get to have an online classroom, so in a very remote world where you are kind of all on your own. You're left to kind of your own devices, it feels like. I know that's something that a lot of students say to me. This is an opportunity to come in and chat with some peers, connect with them. A lot of the students that I work with in workshops, they end up kind of forging connections and continuing to email students that they've met in our workshops. So it's just a really great opportunity for them to not have this concept of loneliness in this online world. So I have a lot of being a writing, reading kind of coach. Most of my workshops, all of them, really revolve around the topics of reading and writing, or I really try to make them into one topic because reading and writing are not two separate things. So I have a workshop. It's called it's been called a couple of different things, but basically it's reading anxiety. We get to come together as this really great group. When students sign up, they can come into the group and kind of openly talk about the angst that we all feel, or that they feel specifically about the different assignments that they're facing. And then we get to go through a couple of activities. One we do in this very abstract kind of way, and the second activity we do, we've been talking about this concept throughout the evening, we go through it in a very mindful way in order to really focus on what we're doing and how we are acknowledging the anxieties and how they are skills to get us through them in all of the assignments that we're doing. That one's one, I love that one. That's one that Dave and I have actually done together. And I know that he'll talk about a couple of other workshops that run off of that workshop that, again, we were able to do them together. Hopefully we'll be able to do them together soon because we have a lot of fun going back and forth in those. So that's another great benefit of those workshops specifically, is that you get two coaches together that are bouncing off ideas off each other. I have another workshop. It's called Critical Reading. And this one, again, we kind of get together as a group, the group of students that sign up. We come in and we talk about what exactly does this word critical mean in not only academia, but kind of our personal lives, and how we can use our own personal concept of this word critical in our reading and writing. And we kind of go through this little toolbox of activities that we can use and connect it with our personal idea of critical, as well as that academic concept of what critical means when we're writing, a critical assignment or, critical essay. Think critically is what they always tell us. I have another one that focuses on vocabulary, where we try to have as many open conversations as possible to be able to talk about what do we do when we are reading and we come across a word. We come across a sentence or a paragraph, or let's be honest, sometimes it's the entire scholarly article that we're reading that we're like, what is this written in Swahili? Like, what am I reading? So we talk about how that happens to all of us, and then we go through some skills and strategies again as a group to kind of talk about what do we do when that occurs to us. I have another one called Writing with Precision, where we talk about what it actually means to write with this kind of concept. What is college discourse? What does that mean? So we kind of break down in a very broad way what kind of those expectations are for like college writing and how we approach that. Because that's one thing that a lot of students in my one-on-one sessions or workshops, or when I'm meeting with students in live chat, that's one of the things that they are always talking about, is that they feel like they don't sound smart enough. So how can we kind of broadly talk about that concept? I have a couple more I'll quickly talk about. I have another one that's called Essays That Show and Tell. This is just a delightful little workshop where we kind of just get to talk about the role of description, and how description isn't just for creative writing or that narrative writing. It's really a great place to put, not a great place, it's a really great thing to put into our academic essays, because it's the first step to analyzing things on a really deep level. So we talk about that and where we can fit it into our essays. And then I also have another workshop that just focuses on deep analysis. It plays really nicely like a wine and cheese. It plays really nicely with Essays That Show and Tell. And we just talk about what analysis is, and we go through this little toolkit of strategies and stuff to that deep analysis that we can apply whenever we are analyzing anything. And finally, I have one more that I run. It's called the Citation Formatting Forum. This one is not as much fun as the other topics, because nobody likes to really talk about APA, MLA, or Chicago style, but it is something we have to talk about. It's something we all have to learn. So this workshop is set up in more of an open format, where students get to come in and ask their questions that they're dying to know. And I try to, I do my best to answer them on the topics of APA, MLA, and Chicago style. And I also give just a broad overview of in-text citations, references, formatting, and we touch very, very lightly on paraphrasing and summarizing. But I will note that one of our other academic coaches, Deborah Harbin, runs a wonderful workshop called Transformative Paraphrase that dives deeper into it than my citation workshop goes.
Try every flavor.
Try them all. They're wonderful. Come to my workshops.
Every scent. And I will also say that I think because we collaborate amongst ourselves to banish loneliness, that a lot of these things can overlap. So if you try a few workshops and they're not your cup of tea, I'm currently working on some interactives, which are self-led resources that are sort of like click and answer. They interact with you. That's why they're called interactives. And two of them are about citation. We have a few other ones. We have a couple math ones, and those are great. Since I use my colleagues as subject matter experts, there usually is a little bit of overlap in how these things are taught, and they can reinforce each other. So what about you, David?
Well, tough act to follow here.
He only does the one, and it's about film.
I do them too. I do some, yeah. To talk about like our collaborations in the past, I think I'm so excited to be able to get back to those, because Dee and I, we've done this series of workshops on reading and writing and looking at anxiety. But what I like about what we do is we look right at the solution. I find that in our workshops, we're not like okay, and here are the 10 things that make us anxious. We eventually talk about those. Like when we talk about, but we actually have an agenda. Like you do this wonderful, analysis of stories where you do a Dr. Seuss piece, and then you lead into a Ray Bradbury piece, and it's just pretty brilliant how it just starts. It's just like that complete form of of like, let's look at what, and I think the Dr. Seuss piece is harder than the Ray Bradbury piece. And you've even said that when you read it, right? When it's got all this language to it. And the collaborate, and we don't do enough of those, I don't think, and that's why I always thrive on those collaborative pieces, even with what we're doing right now, because I kind of feel like to add to the loneliness theme, it gets pretty lonely just kind of being on your own and just doing all that, and getting all these different perspectives is the way to go. Well, I mean, I do a lot of workshops, everything from integrating research to finding your voice, conquering writer's block, which I don't think there's any such thing as, and that's what I prove in the workshop. You have to come to the workshop to see what that means.
Plot twist.
More at 11. Win Your Case, which is on persuasive writing, and then the reading anxiety ones. But one that I'll feature just for a moment is the discussion board writing one, which is one that I do most frequently throughout the course of a term. And I think it's one that I think that, I wanted to put together a workshop in essence, and I tell the students this, it's probably the assignment that you do the most. If you look at your entire SNHU career,
as far as
right,
writing goes,
right, how many discussion boards are you really doing? If you're doing one a week, or almost one a week.
Why don't we pause it for people who don't go to SNHU yet and are chomping at the bit to do so, what discussion boards are and what their function are in a class?
Right, absolutely. Since we do online courses as asynchronous education, we can't all be on at the same time because it would be virtually impossible with people's schedules. So we have an asynchronous format where typically an instructor will post a question prompt, and then the students will come on and do two posts. They'll do a longer first post addressing it, and then they'll take they'll look at their peers' posts, and they'll probably choose 2 or 3 to respond to. So it becomes a very interactive process. And although it's not live, it can actually, when done right, it can actually mirror a live interaction, which is really cool. And I talk a lot about that in the workshop as well too. But the workshop itself is just the strategies of like how what do you do, like when you write a post, what's a good way of going about doing it. And I find that some of the simple skills can actually really come in handy. Start right away with a greeting. As obvious as it sounds, hello everyone. Imagine that concept, and then sign your name at the end. Because I think when you're making something personal, when you're writing it in this format, you're immediately in that mode to say something profound. And, so that first post is typically, and we're trying to look at ways of how things like strategies like reading out loud, which I think is great for all types of writing. I think all writing is in a way meant to be read out loud, but in this case, when you do your post, then read it out loud. Imagine what it's like if you were in an actual classroom. What would it be like to like, what would these words sound like? So you're writing in that conversational tone. And then what I really try to talk about is to avoid what I call static posts. And I don't know if you did those static posts, and as an online instructor, I come across that a lot too. Static post is simply you're going in and you're answering the question, and you might be doing a brilliant job answering it, right? But the problem is it's not an exam or a quiz, or you're not posting a paper, you're doing a discussion. So what are you doing to take the prompt and bring it to a level? So I talk about ideas of like, well, how can you bring in your own personal experiences? What you already know, like through your family life, through your work life, can be so significant, even if you're learning a topic for the first time. You're taking a psychology course and you're using cognitive psychology, things like executive functioning, to use a John Baker favorite. And then what you can say, one
of our guests on episode 2.
Nice, yeah. But it's taking something like that. It's like, okay, well, I'm learning that cognitive skill, like executive functioning skills, for the first time. But then you start realizing what it is, and you say, well, I have examples of that already. So then encouraging them to bring in examples from their own life to show that. And another strategy that I talk about too is at the end of the post that you're trying to make personal is to end it off with a question. Have a question that you feel might be a good topic for discussion. Also use it as an opportunity to get clarification with something that's challenging you. That might even be difficult material. So if you might be reading a novel, you could be reading The Color Purple, which is one of my favorite novels to talk about. And you could be like, yeah, this is a great novel. Here's what I thought the ending meant. And then you'll give your description of it, but you might be like, but you know what? I was still a little confused because it was ambiguous. So I'm not sure what I thought, but here's what I thought. What do you all think? Am I on the right track? And when you set that up there too, I mean, you're immediately giving your instructor, material to work with, which is great. Your material, yes. Well, as a matter of fact, and then the professor can go in there and say, yeah, you are on track, but think about it this way. And then your peers will also have material to work with too. So I'm finding that the discussions can be super engaging and you can learn from each other and all that stuff too. And you can do it all in this sort of asynchronous, non-live format, which can be really remarkable. And you're doing it on your own clock, so you're going in your own time. But you can still get the
between nap times and laundry folding.
Exactly. Yes. Right. Yeah.
I love that Dave focused on the discussion workshop, because I know all of your workshops are just wonderful and fantastic, and students are always giving you so many kudos that I work with. But your discussion workshop is really wonderful because, so for those that aren't familiar with what happens in a one-on-one session, it depends on what you're in there for. But one of the things that I get to do with students is I work with students regularly throughout the term, for start to finish. I've seen students all the way up to their graduation, and I get graduation photos. We love photos. So fun. But one of the things I get to do is, sometimes we brainstorm. Sometimes students don't actually have something they've written. They just need to come in and talk about what they might have to write. And the students that I work with regularly, we kind of go through their weekly assignments and talk about them. And after they've attended your discussion workshop, I'll say, okay, well, what do we have for a discussion? And they're like, no, I don't need to talk about my discussion with you this week because I took Dave's workshop and I'm really confident on my discussion writing now.
Oh,
so let's
Jim.
focus on, yes. So kudos to that workshop.
So if it ain't broke, right? Don't fix it. There you go. No. Yeah.
And I don't know if this is I don't know if this is related to that or not, but I feel like I used to coach discussions a lot and it kind of dwindled away. I have a feeling too that as students go through, they get more confident with them because they realize that it's meant to be a little bit lighter, a little bit conversational, and they see that the prompt. So for listeners who haven't engaged in like typed discussions yet, you'll get a prompt with some questions to help you basically prove that you read your readings for the week, which is how in my experience in face-to-face undergrad, that's what we would do. We would talk about what we read. I actually did my master's thesis on classroom discussion about literature. Just saying. Specifically, I did, yeah, but that was for high school, but same idea. And the thing I wanted to say before is that now a lot of classes, especially at the grad level at SNHU, for folks who like to hear their own voice and look at their own face like me, you can do video discussions. So some of my grad classes that I'm in right now, you have the option to record yourself talking about the answer. And then my last class, it was so funny because you could tell like what people like already taught and stuff, because some people were just, there was a required discussion where you had to record yourself for one, and some people were just like reading their answer line by line really stiffly, which is fine. It's all part of the process. But I just thought it was interesting to see the differences. And then the one girl that I responded to, we're still pen paling a little bit. We have the same birthday. Crazy. And she had like this really cute map behind her in her video of the US. It was really colorful. And she's like, here's my teaching stuff. I'm an ESL teacher. And so am I. And we have the same birthday. And she was so animated and fun and obviously just like talking off the cuff with maybe a few notes like I do. So I hope that becomes more developed and that we can start to, academic support also has small groups where that discussion can take place live. We can start to do more live stuff, because I think it's, the social creature that I am, I learned a lot from just having discourse with classmates for sure.
It's remarkable too how a lot when people are getting used to the idea of an online education. I know that there's still kind of that that comparison of like, well, this is the way it was, right? The classroom mentality. And I can just speak from years of experience now at this stage, that I would go so far as to say it's more personal. It can really honestly be more personal than a classroom experience. Whereas I find that I had an online class today with an English course that I teach. And it was just like it was a phenomenal. A couple of students read their essays, and it ended up turning into this wonderful. Talk about like empathetic to use that word. That because what they wrote about was very personal stuff. It was about their coming of age, family issues, their own identity. Remarkable stuff. That really branched off into people talking about their own lives and all that stuff too. And I've been in the classroom before. The classroom is its own thing. I mean, it's good to be live and face to face in that respect too. But I find that people just tend to be more comfortable. So I know we talk about the loneliness, but on the flip side of that too, there's also the comfort of your own home and your own space, and you don't have to kind of feel like you're being you're on. Even when the camera's on, I kind of find that there's still a freedom. Even like right now, I kind of find that there's I think I'm less nervous myself And I do admit that I do get nervous with these things. Like I remember when I was on the radio before too, I was just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe why is my heart going so fast? But I find that, but in this situation, it's not like that. There's something more comforting about that. And I've had a wonderful opportunity. Like for instance, one of our writing coaches, not writing coach, former writing coach, like the left and right brain guy, Jared.
Yeah, now a math coach.
Yeah. Now a math coach. It was remarkable to be able to work with him. But yeah, he and I just like have started a ritual since COVID that we meet every week. And I kind of, after a while, I'm just like, you know what? Out of all the, the friendships that I've had since I was like a kid, like my buddies and friends from like grade school, I'm like, I've probably talked to Jared longer than them, than my brothers,
credit hours.
Yeah. When you look at it that way, I'm just kind of thinking, but that's kind of like an interesting dynamic that this type of atmosphere can create. Even if you're in a workshop, some people come to workshops once a week or 2 or 3 times a week. Before you know it, you get to know them in a way that you might not in that sort of, that class that meets Mondays and Wednesdays. And, then I might be sitting in office hours for a little bit and then that's it. Whereas this is more compact, and as we all know, and it's, so for a plug for online education, I don't think it's not an alternative. It's the real thing. It's it's a happening shift.
This is how it works now.
It's working now. Yeah.
Well, that brings us to my last question I was going to ask anyway, which David read my mind and not the script. So my final question to you both, and I'll have Dee start since Dave already kind of started. What are the benefits of online learning our students might be surprised to know? So Dee, you mentioned how your son is maybe thriving a little more in this environment. What else? Or how does that manifest?
Yeah, I think it's like kind of what Dave was saying, and also, what my son has experienced in high school, where you have a little bit more freedom to kind of just be yourself. I think the analogy that I was thinking of as Dave was talking, and this may be a terrible analogy, but I'm going to use it anyways.
All of Greg Pickett's analogies were about sports, so
this is not about sports.
Yeah, mine will probably be movies.
Maybe.
So.
Yeah, let's mix it up, kids.
Maybe I can circle it to sports, but we'll see. One of the students that I worked with, she had this really, really fun personality, and she would talk about, a lot of the things that were happening on social media, some of the drama that would present itself on social media. And she would call those people that would just kind of go on and maybe say some things that you might not say in person. And so she would call those people keyboard gangsters, which I always thought was really funny. But if you think of it in that regard, but put a positive spin on it and think about how this new persona develops where you do have more, there's a comfort level that you have where you kind of end up, if you were the type of person that maybe kind of sat in the back of the classroom trying to avert the teacher's eyes because you didn't want to be called on, because you don't want to say the wrong thing, that starts to kind of disappear a little bit in the online environment, and you can end up thriving really, really well, which has been the case for my son, as well as a lot of other students that I know and get to work with. But another area is just the community. I think, I'm always surprised, and I've worked at SNHU for like 7 or 8 years now, and I'm still always kind of continually surprised by how great this community truly is. If for those that are thinking like, oh, I'm going to miss out on that like college campus experience, there are so many great things that we have. You have this wonderful team of advisors that work with our students. We have our wonderful academic support that's here. There's a ton of like clubs. If you have an interest or a hobby outside of education, there is probably a club for you that you can be a part of and get in on. You can even try to create your own club if there's not an interest that you're not involved with. And there's even some of the different programs, and Kayleigh, you might know this from being in the MFA, but a lot of the different programs, the deans will get together and put on these seminars for the students. Like most recently, I know from one of my MFA students that I get to work with, was telling me that there was this really great panel that came together. There was like a professional author and an editor and a literary agent to kind of just
I missed
be there
that one
and
because I was
talk.
hosting a podcast.
So there's
But I got
there's
the
all
email.
there's all these opportunities, so within the community and, this opportunity to be a part of this college experience, there's also just a lot of opportunities to continue learning outside of your classroom. And it's just, like I said, I've been doing this for a while, and I'm always surprised and amazed at how, like, oh, we do that. Oh, we do that. It's
We've
really
got
cool.
it all.
We do.
I like how you phrased a student I get to work with too, because that's something that I think is, we're coming up on time, so it may be a nice pathway into my outro here, but that's how we feel about you learners and listeners and writers and mathers and STEMers and businessers, that we get to work with you. We get to practice our own reflection, thinking, inquiry with you, and build skills alongside you. So, thanks for having us. Any final notions about the benefits of online learning from you, David?
I just love what both you and Dee had said too. You kind of ended it off. I think it'll be a good place to sort of end, because you ended it off on an empathy note. That idea, I'm completely on board too. Like, yes, I get, it's an honor and a privilege to work with people, because I think that if anybody can kind of say, hey, that guy David knows his stuff, and he's a good coach, or he's a good writer. I mean, I owe it to the community, because there's a lot of things that you don't do alone. I steal. When you steal from the best. And sometimes that can be my students that I'm working with, and yeah. So again, it's a collaboration.
Well, I want to thank my guests, Deanna Parker and David Gonthier, for coming on one more time. Loneliness is a perception of isolation, albeit an unpleasant one. Students can overcome this by noting their support systems and leveraging these to stay connected. When you join a coaching session, don't feel like you have to be ready. We'll meet you where you are. Community is everywhere, and at a school like SNHU, we account for online learners' needs for that community. So academic support, advising, instructors, librarians, and many, many other groups are all working in a unique way to help you, as Steve mentioned earlier. Workshops are a great environment to learn skills for your classes and beyond. It's a unique modality available to SNHU students who prefer to meet in groups amongst peers. If you're interested, sign up for workshops on a variety of topics from the academic support module in Brightspace. That's it for today, dear listeners. I'd like to close the episode with an excerpt from the academic support mission. We believe that all learners are capable of growth with support and collaboration. So come collaborate with us. Existing students can once again find academic support right under modules in your courses. If you're not learning with SNHU yet, think about it. You'll have the best support system in higher ed behind you. Visit snhu.edu to learn more. This has been Learning You with Coach Kayleigh Guzel. From all of us at Academic Support, thank you for tuning in. We hope to work with you soon.